Hi, everybody. Welcome to our Wise Women Forward podcast. I'm Christopher Henze, Director of Wise Women, Humanity's Untold Origins, and I'm with Dominique DeBrew, my wife, inspiration and producer of the film and profound Wise Women. Today, we're talking to Jody Day. She's a psychotherapist and founder of the Childless Movement at Gateway Women, a work that reconnects facilitator and the author of Living the Life Unexpected, How to Find Hope, Meaning, and a Fulfilling Future Without Children. You can find her on Substack at Jody Day. Links will be attached.
Hi, Jody. I'm so glad you're here. One of the after effects of us making this movie is the ability for me to talk to all of these fantastic wise women like you.
Mm,
So I'm so glad to have you here with us today.
thank
Tell
you.
us,
I'm honored to be invited, and it was, the film is fascinating. Thank you for
thank
making
you.
it.
Thank you. So tell us about yourself and what drives you.
Oh goodness, that's a big one to kick out the gate. So I'm in my early 60s and postmenopausal since my late 40s, and the sort of transition for me through my menopause has been a big learning experience because it's also been wrapped up in my involuntary childlessness. So, as you know, I was married in my 20s and trying to conceive in my 30s, and I wasn't able to conceive, and then my marriage broke down at the end of my 30s. So I entered my 40s single and childless, and discovered that as far as society was concerned, I was a complete sort of social plankton, totally a wasted space, a failed female project. I used to joke that the only invitations I got were to dental checkups. I mean, it was literally like I had no value to anyone. And this came as an incredible shock to me because I hadn't, although I'd been a feminist in my sort of teens and early 20s, I'll be honest, I parked a lot of it in order to be with the man that I fell in love with in my early 20s. And I hadn't really understood how much of my status in the world was actually attached to being part of a heterosexual partnership. I was really, really shocked in my 40s to see how little value society placed on anything to do with me because I was both unpartnered and wasn't a mother. I also had a difficult time because everybody else in my social circle who wanted to become a mother became a mother. Some people struggled with fertility, had fertility treatments, and they worked. And I was very, very lonely. And so I started writing a blog about my experience because I found out that, I'm born in 64, that sort of 1 in 4 of my generation were probably didn't have children. And I was like, where the hell are they? Because I didn't know any, either in my family, in my sort of social circle, business circles, anywhere. I knew a couple of child-free women, so child-free by choice, who were artists, who were quite radical out there women, and I was a little bit scared of them. And I thought, well, that's not me. And then the stuff I would find online about child-free women was really radical, and it was about people who hated children and hated parents. And I just thought, is that what people are going to think about me? So I started writing a blog using my own name and my own photo 15 years ago. And it was extraordinary when it went viral because I was the first person who was writing about being single and childless, not by choice. So I wasn't talking about the only things that were out there, usually were anonymous, usually green and purple with some flowers on it, kind of all sort of self-helpy. And they were also from heterosexual married women writing personal experiences, very valuable, but about life after fertility treatments not working. And that was the only narrative that was out there. And mine was I was a bit of a sort of rock chick London girl. I, designed the website myself, and I had a design background. So it just looked like my kind of thing. But the fact that I was using my real name and photograph, I didn't realize it. I broke a big taboo just by not being ashamed of my life, sort of not taking the patriarchal pill that somehow I was of less value. So excuse me, Pushkin may have to leave.
Okay.
Pushy, I love you to bits, darling, but you might have to leave us. I suspect he might be manipulating me for food because he can see how much I'm paying attention to you. Just an extra snack, you know?
And also taking care of you while you're talking about what
Yeah,
you've
something
gone
very
through.
deep. Yeah. So the blog was like within one day, I had people writing to me from all over the world saying, how do you know the exact words in my head? I thought I was the only person having these thoughts. And then The Guardian picked it up and I was interviewed in The Guardian. And that article is still being read and shared today. And in that one, I talked also about the difficulty of how my childlessness and my singleness had impacted my friendship group, because my whole friendship group, they were all involved with each other and their families. And I was very much left out of that. And so from that start, thinking that like 4 people might read it, it kind of mushroomed, and the blog was called Gateway Women and it became an organization. So women started asking me, you seem to understand something about this and that other people aren't, could you do something? And I was like, really, me? My self-esteem and my confidence was on the floor. I was also recovering from a narcissistic romance with someone with narcissistic personality disorder. So I'd had, terribly emotionally abusive experience. So I was really, really low in my mid 40s. But I kind of thought, well, no one else is doing this. And there seems to be a real need for what we wanted to talk about. So I carried on and I started my first group and I started giving public talks and appearing on podcasts. And then I started a big online community, a private online community for childless, not by choice women called Gateway Women, which is still going today. And wrote my book. I wrote and self-published the first version of my book, which the first one was called Rocking the Life Unexpected. But then when it was picked up and republished by Pam Macmillan a few years later, we changed the title to Living the Life Unexpected. So that's had sort of 3 editions. It's still thought to be, a decade on, sort of the Bible, for want of a better word, for childless women. And now I'm in my 60s. I'm really focusing on the next part of the journey, which is elderhood without motherhood. So in 2014, I was one of 4 campaigners in the UK who set up something called Aging Without Children, which is now a UK charity. And I'm not involved in that anymore because I don't live in England anymore. I live in Ireland. But I have been thinking about the existential and practical aspects of aging without children, and really how biased, unfortunately, the conversation about menopause and the conversation about being a powerful older woman so often defaults to the grandmother narrative. Even things about, for example, climate change. There are so many climate change and activist organizations which focus around the intergenerational aspect of doing it for our grandchildren. And I don't have a problem with that, but it does exclude 1 in 4, perhaps coming up to 1 in 5 of us. There are so many more people not having children for a wide variety of reasons, on a spectrum between choice and not choice. It's not simple. And I strongly believe that, although my childlessness was a dark night of the soul for me, it really made me look at my life purpose and my value in a very, very profound way. And I did not believe that my life on this earth could only be defined by having or not having children, and that I too can be a good ancestor. There are many ways I can contribute to this world and to future generations. And just because I don't have a little biological part in that future, I care passionately about this beautiful world and all the beautiful children and people already in it and all those to come. I don't need to be a mother and grandmother to do that. And I think that's enough about me. And I recently won an award for my writing about elderhood without motherhood, which was great. I won an Advantages of Age award for one of my Substack pieces. And I have a project called Alterkin, which is, I'm running the pilot project for that here in rural Ireland. And that is to create an alternative kinship network. So it is about a consciously chosen group of people who are aging without children. And we have made a commitment to each other to be each other's family. in the way that adult children hopefully would have done, but that's not always how it works out. Life is complicated. But
So
yeah,
beautiful.
thank
We're
you.
That's
so
fantastic.
grateful that the world has people like you, and um, it's just what a wonderful story.
So what's interesting to me
Mm,
is as we made the movie Wise Women,
mm,
one of the things that I realized is that not only are we living in an unnatural way, that
mm.
things are organized in a patriarchy, which is not really the natural thing, but also the patriarchy has divided us into small nuclear families,
Mm,
which I personally feel is less natural than the tribal state.
yeah.
And I have a few friends who have decided to be childless and have gone through a lot of stuff because of it. A
Hmm.
lot of pressure of why, etc. And truthfully, one of them is a perfect auntie to her
Hmm.
nephews and embodies much more of what that tribal structure ought to be.
Mm,
And we are seeing right now that women who do have children are under a tremendous amount of pressure because
yeah.
there's not enough support. What struggles have you had in
Mm,
our societal structure now, and how would you like to see the societal structure become?
mm. Well, I'm absolutely there with you that the nuclear family, as Lisa Sibbett said recently in an article, is a failed institution. It is extremely fragile. There was a book I read called How to Be Childless, which is by a Canadian or American philosopher. I will remember her name in a minute. It's just doing a menopausal lap of the room. It'll be back. And in it, she really talked about horizontal kinship systems, and how these are really the roots of our kind of evolutionary way of being as a species, because a nuclear family is very fragile. It only takes one parent to be ill, or to die, and the structure practically crumbles. It also creates an environment where, new mothers are isolated, which is so terrible for their mental health and so terrible. It's just not the right environment for children at a time when they need so much support, both practical, emotional, spiritual, in every way. They're often isolated. So but there is a kind of silo around the nuclear family. As someone who doesn't have children, it is surprisingly hostile to us. It's amazing. It's actually, you think that, number one, if you're without children, not by choice like me, and you're going through a grieving period, actually being around other people's kids is too damn hard,
Mm.
because you are heartbroken by it. So you're not like that easy plug and play auntie, whereas perhaps someone who's child free by choice and has known that since their early 20s, maybe before, can actually get more involved. They might have a very kind of joyful relationship with kids, and that doesn't leave them with a terrible grief hangover that has them in bed for 3 days. They open their heart to kids, and then they go, I would go home and I would be crushed knowing that I would never have that relationship myself. So there's a difference there. But when you're through the grief, it's quite different. Now, there can be some hostility to this idea that the role of women without children is to kind of fill the gaps in the family lives of people with children. So it always has to be handled quite carefully. But something I've noticed, so I'm an only child, but in my first marriage, my ex-husband had many siblings. He was one of six, and most of them had children. So there's one particular family where there are four girls, four daughters, who are, I call them my nieces by love, not blood. Very close to them. And, I've been divorced 25 years and I'm still very close to them. And one of the things that made that relationship possible was that their mother did not gatekeep my relationship with them, because unconsciously mothers can fear letting childless and child-free women near their daughters in case somehow our childlessness rubs off on them. There's a lot of unconscious stuff at play around this. So she really let me have lovely relationships with them. And of three of them, so two of them have children, one of them is currently pregnant. And the youngest one, who of course is the rebel artist in the family, is the one I'm closest to, and she's child-free by choice. But it wasn't until she came to a talk of mine, all four of them did, on International Women's Day, I don't know, 15 years ago. And she was about 16 at the time, the youngest one. And she came up to me afterwards and said, Jode, you mean I don't have to have children? And I went, no, you don't have to. You know, we live at a time when it's possible to choose not to. I said, you might choose to have them like I did, and that doesn't work out either. So it's not like, you know, you can just choose and you have what you want. But it was amazing that, you know, she still hadn't been exposed to the idea that it might be possible to choose not to have children, which is what she's done. And she's a very successful, musical artist instead. That's her choice. And I remember I've had a long chat with her last night. We've built a very close relationship over the years. I've had discussions with her that she would not have been comfortable to have with her mum. And it's my childlessness has actually been an important part of our relationship, because those four girls, as they were going through puberty and older, I was different to their other aunts. They could actually identify with me more because they could imagine having my life. Because you know what I mean? They could imagine being out in the world. They could imagine having a career. They couldn't quite yet imagine having their own children and their own families. So I was different to their other aunts, who were just the mothers of their cousins. Whereas I was, I had the nickname, I was GA, I was glamorous auntie, because, I had the cute little car and the interesting life in design in London, and I represented something different. And I think that is so precious. I never told them what to do or that one way of living was more than another. But kids really need to see lots of different kinds of lives. I mean, there's an old expression, you can't be it if you can't see it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I don't think I influenced any of them to go in any direction, but I think they also saw in me that I dealt with a great deal of adversity and I turned it into meaning.
I would see that. Like, what I'm struck by the way when I hear Dominique talk, or you even talking about this stuff, is, and it's a section in the film, it's of men behaving badly, but it's the amount of time and the amount of ways that women are gaslit by the patriarchy. And women are so gaslit about this concept of that they need to fulfill that specific role. And my point of view about women is that you guys are so gracious that you really take it on, as opposed to just, push back.
The specific gaslighting, and this is something that I learned through us making the film the most, is that women are told from very early on, from infancy, that our time of reproductive fertility is the most important. That basically, yes, we can do all sorts of things, but us having babies holds the highest importance.
Yes.
And that is so detrimental to any of us, whether we choose to have children or not. Because if we do choose to have children, then we get to menopause, and then now what? We're now irrelevant, not important anymore. And it's hurtful because at that time we are understanding that we have all of this experience, all of this wisdom. And once you get post-menopausal, yes, there's the problems and the symptoms and the stuff. But once you're beyond that and you know how to handle them, you have this clarity, this focus, this decisiveness, and you have so much to offer society. So I think that is the biggest gaslighting and the problem. And I'm so sad that you had to go through that, but I'm so just amazed that you went through it and created this beautiful space for women to realize that no, there's no problem in being childless. It's just another way.
Yeah, and if we didn't have the patriarchy pressure, I'm sure there would be many more women who would choosing not to have children. And it's like there's so much, the reproduction is so like, and I don't think we'd have the population problems that we have.
Yeah.
So,
We're seeing many more young people,
oh yeah,
choosing not to have children. I mean, often, the narrative is that there's either mothers and there's the child free. There's the people who chose not to have children, and there's people who are mothers. In actual fact, those without children, the majority of people without children didn't choose it. And
yeah,
that often gets kind of hidden in the statistics, and journalists often don't know the difference between childless and child free. And then sometimes you get people who call themselves child free when they're childless, and everyone's free to choose however they want to describe it. But what I think we're seeing, and I've been predicting this for several years, is that I think the number of child-free people is really, really increasing. So young people who are choosing not to have children for multiple reasons. And that is massively impacting this big demographic shift we're going through, where we have, the boomers are aging. And people talk about population decline. It's like, there's a clue in the word, baby boom. It was a big boom of people. And actually, we're now returning to a slightly more normal fertility rate for actually since modernity. I mean, I think 10% is the rate of natural medical infertility in humans. So if every woman was trying to get pregnant, 10% of them wouldn't be able to. So there have always been in our tribes, in our evolutionary history, there have always been women without children. And I can't imagine it's ever been easy, to be honest, even when we were perhaps matriarchies and matrilineal, because then it was a celebration of fertility and womanhood and all of that. So probably not to be a mother has always been to be slightly marginalized. But those are the women who are the priests and the healers and the shamans. We have a different role. The outsider actually is very valuable to the tribe. The outsider is just as much as the part of the tribe as every other person who's an insider, because change always comes from the margins.
yeah.
Actually, those people are so important.
We're calling this whole thing Wise Women Forward because one of the things the patriarchy does is it has you languish in things that have happened because they're so dramatic. And part of the idea is to keep our gaze looking forward, to keep our concept about what's next. And what's next is Wise Women. And that's one of the things that we tried to get across in the film. And you've seen the film, right?
Yeah.
Cool. What was some of your thoughts about the movie?
Thank you so much for saying something other than that grandmother hypothesis. I mean, when it came in, I was really enjoying the film, and then that came in, I thought, and this is the bit where I stop enjoying it, And I love that also you introduced the academic who really did the original work on that. That was fascinating to actually hear it from her. But I was just really, really happy that actually the thesis of the film is very much that it's not that wisdom is not just there at the service of grandchildren. That wisdom is actually there in service of future generations and also the ones that are here. So my something back to what Dominique said about being gaslit, that this is the time when we're no longer needed, and we're not useful in any way as women who are postmenopausal, unless you're kind of looking after your grandchildren. I mean, I hate that idea because, like you, it does not chime with my experience of this time of life at all. And it is, like so much of our culture, so phenomenally wasteful. Because here we have this incredible resource of older women, postmenopausal, as you say, with a clarity. And actually, when estrogen kind of partially or completely leaves the building, you're not really that impressed by guys most of the time anymore.
Yeah.
I feel more like I did before puberty, which is like, boys, yeah, what are they for?
Come on, we can get things off of tall shelves. I can lift heavy stuff, maybe make you laugh every once in a while.
They have their uses, but the idea that I would
make a movie,
arrange my life to conform to their opinion, I'm just like, wow, that was a 45-year detour. I'm glad that's over.
Yeah.
And what to me is super interesting, you said that, the 10% who are not fertile kind of in a natural setting,
Yeah.
become the outsiders. But what if they're not, right? Nature sets things up well, where these women, I love the term child free because they
Mm,
are free to do something else with their creativity. You know,
mm,
you think the second chakra is the chakra of creativity. You can
mhm.
use it to create a human or create something else. So to me, it exists in nature because it is useful.
I
And
agree.
that's what we need to go back to. And I'm a
Mhm,
proponent of communes. In the 60s, people coming together in
mm,
communes, they had the problem that there was the sex and the drugs. But no, how
mm.
about going back to tribes, to communes, and us working all together?
I mean, imagine if when you were starting, because you're pre-cycling and you feel normal, just as you said, it's
Mm,
like
mm,
formidable, and then this thing descends upon you, and that's why I put
mm,
my daughter in the movie, our daughter,
mm,
because she's reminding women what a nightmare that is.
mhm,
Um, but it was like even that commune thing. Imagine if the women who start cycling have other women who are either in it or starting it or whatever right next to them so that they could say, this is
mhm,
your crazy time. This is what you're going to feel.
mhm,
And so women always in every form need to be surrounded by other women. And the patriarchy just isolates them so effectively. And it's how it maintained this power for so long. It's been 10,000 years, right? And
mm.
so this is why, again, Wise Women Forward, trying to bring people together. And
And trying to bring women together.
yeah.
And especially in
Mm,
this country, we need to come together because our rights to our own body are being
mhm,
taken away.
And that's why we're
mhm,
grateful that you've joined us and we're bringing more people together,
mm,
and that we keep moving forward.
mm. I mean, my work is about bringing women together, and I first started bringing them together online. And I've had sort of in-person, workshops, events, and I think that sitting in a circle in a sacred space, with other women and talking about intimate stuff about our lives is just feels like the oldest form of healing there is. I mean, I'm now creating. So I have a workshop called the Reignite Weekend, which has been running for 14 years, which is very much helping women through that transitional space of making peace with their unchosen childlessness and really like, what am I going to dedicate my life to? How is this going to work? What is my plan B or Z or whatever it might be? But now I'm creating a new retreat, a new workshop, which is going to happen actually in the winter of 2026, because it needs to happen in the dark time of the year, just after Halloween in the Celtic calendar. This is the time of year, it's the beginning of the year, but it's also the time of the Cailleach. It's the time of the dark winter goddess, the old woman, the hag, the crone, who actually created the world, by the way. No one says thank you, but
Yes.
and it's really the next stage. It's like, how do we come together? How do we share stories about how we've been wounded? How do we heal each other? And then how do we dedicate our beautiful, wise, childless hearts as kind of initiated elders to the service of the world? Because there's such potential in older women, and it's often kept quite private. It's difficult to find an outlet for it. It's gaslit and shamed by the patriarch. This sounds like a mad segue, but at the moment I'm listening to a podcast about Joan of Arc. And every time she kind of went up against the English, what they were throwing back at her was, you whore, you witch. It's this sexual shaming, that the patriarchy uses to try and keep women down. Nothing has changed. Whether it's crazy cat ladies or, people yelling at Joan of Arc, it's get back in your patriarchal box and shut up.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's why I was so grateful that Sharon Blackie joined the film, because she talked a
Mm,
lot about how the oldest writings, the oldest records are about formidable
mm.
women. So,
I'm a big fan. I'm interviewed in one of her books as well. I'm a big fan of her
oh,
work. I
she's
was,
wonderful. Yeah.
yeah,
She's
yeah.
amazing. And I hope that one day we can bring retreats together
Mm,
of us postmenopausal women, be they child free, childless, with children,
Yeah.
because really we need to all come together, take down the divisions that patriarchy has put in there, and just kind of blow the system away
I
and
agree.
create
That's
the
where it
new.
needs to transition
Yeah.
to. There also need to be safe spaces to heal where you're not going to get bingoed, as we call it, by someone whipping out all of the photos of their grandchildren
Yeah.
and expecting you to, ooh and ah about all of them, and or relate their parenting or motherhood or grandmotherhood stories as if they're a universal experience,
Mm.
which is the culture really encourages it. So, um, it's a very natural thing to do, and people often don't realize that maybe 25% of the people in there can't see that as a universal experience. They've either opted out of that or they've been excluded from that, and that can be really hard. So we need to heal, and we need to connect. I mean, I'm an advocate for the child free by choice as well. And I'm also mothers. I have, I wanted to be a mother. I come from my mother. I have lots of mothers around me in the world, and they need more support and understanding. However, the amount of parenting advice on, if you typed it in, could break the internet.
Yeah.
But stuff about being childless not by choice, it's still very, very hidden, and maybe a magazine or a newspaper will do an article or an interview with someone like me once every 5 or 6 years, but they'll have something on parenting and motherhood every single Saturday.
Yeah.
And yet, so there's a sense that the patriarchy and the overculture really validates and pays lip service to the experience of parenting, because all pronatalism is interested in is numbers. It just wants more people like us to populate the planet, whatever the us is. But actually, once a woman has given birth, they don't really care. I mean, there's so little support, that could be given. And to your point, Dominique, about living in communes, I think it's also really important to remember that, I live in rural Ireland. It's still big extended families here. As soon as people did have the economic opportunity to stop living in the same house or the same village as their family, they took it. Because people are difficult. So a commune might solve some things, but it would come with its own set of interpersonal issues, because people are going to people. Being human is complicated. Human relationships are often a real pain in the ass.
Well, I
So,
think that we're gonna move beyond the patriarchy. And it's perhaps the most complex thing because humans were never designed to know that we should be a patriarchy, right? And we cannot put the cat back in the bag or put it in
no.
the closet. And so the incredibly complex issues that we're going to face, I wonder if there's a set of socially aware people who have no reproductive burden, who can put their brains together, their instinct together, and their
Mm.
naturalness together and come up with solutions to what's next. I wonder, does that exist, guys?
Yeah, because I do agree with you um, that in my life, my chosen family
Mm.
is much easier to be around than my blood family.
Yeah.
Yes.
And that's part of the problem,
Mm.
bringing together people who want to help each other in
Mm.
community is a
Mm.
different thing than having to be with these people that I'm related to by blood.
Yeah.
And that's kind of, that can be the issue of why young people fly away from the town, fly
Perhaps,
away
yeah.
from
Mm.
the
Well,
And
we
it's
have to
family.
perhaps
move
not
on.
until they're older,
Yep.
I mean, the number, I mean, when I first realized I definitely wasn't going to be having children, it was a bit late. It was 44 and a half. And it was almost the next thought was, who's going to be there for me when I'm old? It was like I'd never had that thought before in my life, and then it was right there. And it is a huge worry for people who are aging without children for whatever reason. And it's actually a kind of a big worry for parents as well. But it's one that they are able to subsume mostly by sort of not worrying about it, because the kids will sort of sort it out. Even if they don't want to think that their kids are going to, there's a plausible deniability to actually dealing with the issue, which as people without children, we just don't have. And so bringing people together to talk about this is the biggest fear, but then it's the biggest opportunity. But then when I talk to people about, because what I'm doing is I'm creating community, and they'll say, oh, I need community. And I'll say, well, great, you don't need Jodie to do that. You don't, this is open source human code. Nothing I'm doing here is revolutionary. It's just in our hyper individualistic moment, what I'm doing seems, quite odd, like, asking people if they'd like to do this. We've committed to each other for the rest of our lives. We've sort of taken vows. We're getting involved intimately in each other's lives so that we can be that network for each other. And people are like, well, what if I get taken advantage of? What if they say no? What if this? What if that? And I realized that I think the last, I don't know how many years to put on it, but let's just say 50 years of hyper individualism and really the kind of the richness that came after the baby boom and social media seems to have really de-skilled us in the friction, the normal friction of human relationships. Because I'll say to people, oh, community is fun. Community is built by doing inconvenient things for inconvenient people at inconvenient times. And they're like, panic. And I go, yeah, it's also not something you can have. Because when they say, I need community, it's almost like community is a product or an app, and they want it. And I'll say, no, you have to build it.
Yeah.
Day by day, moment by moment, favor by favor, vulnerability by vulnerability, mistake by mistake, friction, because human relationships are about friction. Modernity is about frictionless. You get your food delivered. You have an app that tells you when your trash has been collected. If you really, really wanted to, you'd hardly have to deal with another human being. You could have a digital intermediary for so many things. And I think parenting is one of those things where you discover that life has a lot of friction in it.
Yeah.
So Jodie, we're appreciative of your time, and we cover some great subjects. And just wondering if you want to you're doing that event next October. Are there any other things that you're working on, and just anything to help us close out the show?
Sure. Well, 4 times a year, I host these events called Fireside Wisdom for Childless Elder Women. I've been running them for 5 years now. So, and you can find out about those on my website if you go to gateway-women.com. So they're free to attend. And I have an amazing panel of childless and child-free elder women from around the world, different ones on each topic. And we tackle the big stuff: aging without children, mothers and daughters, caring for elderly parents who don't want to be cared for, all of the kinds of things that we're dealing with, because often people who are aging without children, so without children who might take care of them one day, are actually involved in caring for their own parents without any sense of who might be there for them. So on my Substack, which is called Gateway Elder Women, you'll find lots about what I've been talking about. And really, there is a system, what you're talking about, is there a group of wise people who have ideas about this? Really, what we're talking about is matriarchy. But matriarchy in itself is a word that has been gaslit by the patriarchy to believe that it means women in charge. Matriarchy is not a dominator system. Everything we're dealing with in patriarchy is about domination. Women don't operate like that. We cooperate. The future is cooperation. And we know how to do it.
Matriarchy is community up.
Great. Well, thank you for joining us on this episode of Wise Women Forward. Just if you want to find more about us, we're on Wise Women Forward at Substack, and look for more content. And anybody who wants to go see the movie Wise Women, Humanity's Untold Origins, please check out our website at wisewomenmovie.com. And again, thanks for joining us, Jodie.
Thank you. Thank you for your film. Thank you so much. I can't wait to share it with so many people. Thank you.
Wonderful.
Thank you.